Hi, I'm Jason Carr with Bayer Crop Science. We're here today at our focus site in Woodford County, Illinois, and I'd like to talk a little bit about our planting date study that we have here. Of course, planting at different dates, we had soybeans at all different stages when the frost hit last Friday, and I'd like to talk a little bit about how the different stages that those plants were at allowed them to fare better or worse with the frost that we encountered. Now, the cotyledons and other plant parts have a lot of sugars in them, and that actually lowers the freezing point of the water and the plant, similar to when we put salt on our driveways to melt the ice. And so here's a plant that was protected by the cotyledons. The cotyledons sort of took one for the team, and the rest of the plant looks like it's going to survive. Here's another one that had some damage, and kind of the same story here. This plant is going to survive and do fine. Our March 7th planting date at the time of the frost was emerged, and most of the plants had a unifoliate leaf. You can see they took some damage, but most of them have survived. If we pull individual beans from our March 7th planting date, we can see that there are different levels of damage here. I'd estimate that about 80% of the plants in the plot have no damage at all. We have damage ranging from this plant here with very little damage on the leaves. This plant is going to be totally fine here. We have some, this one has slightly more damage. The unifoliates are completely wiped out, but the nodes should be fine, and this plant should be able to regrow and survive and produce a acceptable yield. This plant here got smoked pretty bad. I'm not sure that this plant is completely dead, and it has a chance to regrow from the nodes there at the cotyledons. This plant is slightly worse, but I still wouldn't 100% rule it out if you look at the green stem above the cotyledons. These plants were planted April 6th, so at the time of the frost on May 8th, these plants were mostly at the VE stage. The cotyledons were just starting to open up, and you can see as we walk down the row, there is very little damage, almost 0% damage in these plants. We can find a plant here and there that was damaged. For example, there's a couple of them right there. But for the most part, these plants at the VE stage sustain no damage. In the third planting date, which was planted on April 20th, we had a somewhat variable response to the frost. Here we had a little bit more residue in this part of the row where I'm showing you, and we had more damage, and that's to be expected because the residue helps trap the heat in the ground and it can't protect the plants as much. Where we go to a less residue part of the row, you can see these plants are healthier, less damage. These are still just barely coming out of the ground here. So as we've seen, there's a lot of factors that factor into whether a soybean plant survives a frost or not, and it's very variable. One thing that has also kind of saved us this year is the uneven emergence we've seen. It's been so cool that the beans have been slow to come out of the ground, and they haven't all come out at once. And so being at different stages like that, some plants survived and some didn't, and allowed us to keep pretty decent stands in a lot of cases. If you're wondering whether or not a replant is warranted in your own particular operation, I suggest you check out some of the links in the notes of this video. Thank you for watching.